Our work site is over 200 miles in space. Our mission? Install new station hardware, giant solar array wings, adding more power, setting the stage for expansion of the International Space Station. The crew is ready, having trained for any last-minute changes to the mission. A mission that builds on experiences of the past and leads us to the journeys of tomorrow. Several of the crew members who will be adding the massive solar arrays to the station are veterans of past station assembly missions. Commander Rick Sturco's first mission was also the first space station assembly flight. At that time, the station had a different look. 2 modules, Zarya and Unity, with no living quarters. When he returns to the station this time, it will look like this. A station grown in size and capability, with roughly 3 times the habitable volume. Crews are living and working there in space and waiting for delivery of a new starboard side wing of solar arrays. Helping make the delivery is pilot Lee Archambault and mission specialist Steve Swanson and Danny Olivas, all making their first flights into space. Joining them are mission specialist Pat Forrester and Jim Riley, both veterans of past station assembly missions.
I realize the best part about flying in space are the people that you fly with. And that, for me, is very true. So one of the things you do is you come together as a group of individuals, all with your own personalities and interests and backgrounds and experiences, all the things that make you who you are. And then you work together very closely, and when you're ready to fly, by the time you launch, you've become something more than just these groups of individuals. You've become a very tightly focused team, and you know these people almost as well as you know your family.
The space station's truss serves as a structural backbone and is made of many segments, port side and starboard side. One mission and one giant piece at a time, NASA has been building on this backbone. The starboard truss segment being delivered for this mission includes solar arrays that will be deployed and activated, adding over 60 kilowatts of power to the station. 4 crew members will make spacewalks to install and unlock the component so it can track the sun. NASA has a name for when humans leave the spaceship and perform a spacewalk. It's called an extravehicular activity, or EVA. Before the astronauts ever leave the airlock for an EVA, years of planning and practice have taken place on the ground. At the center of this preparation are the EVA trainers.
I'm Keith Johnson. I'm the STS-117 EVA lead.
I'm Zeb Scoville, STS-117 EVA task lead.
The EVA trainers teach astronauts how to use a variety of tools and tethers designed specifically for the absence of gravity. It's their job to pay close attention to recent missions, especially when unexpected problems are encountered. During the recent STS-117 mission, a solar array wing was to be retracted, making room for the new solar arrays below it to rotate and track the sun. It was a critical part of the mission, but something went wrong. The giant wing did not fold like a map as it was designed to do.
Good morning.
Copy that.
It took human hands to help the solar array fold correctly. Suddenly, the EVA team for STS-117 was faced with a new major challenge.
The last minute, 2 months before flight, we watched STS-116 and the EVAs drastically changed because we are retracting a solar array much like they did on STS-116, and with all the problems that they had, we had to modify our plan to do the best job to get the solar arrays retracted during our mission.
Among the new procedures, insulating metallic tools and spacesuit gloves with tape, a safety measure to avoid conducting electricity off of the solar panels. The EVA team also practiced clearing the solar panels' grommets over tiny guide wires, using a variety of tools and methods. Should the solar arrays encounter problems, all of these new EVA procedures will help them fold correctly. But for those problems that can't be predicted, the most important tool might be the human mind.
One of the great things about having humans outside that can do this task is that it allows us to put hands-on in the work site and deal with the individual problems that come up as they arise.
The new solar arrays on this mission allow for expansion of the International Space Station with our international partners, including the addition of the Japanese laboratory known as Kilo and the European Space Agency's Columbus Laboratory. Hailed as the greatest engineering achievement in space ever attempted, the completed station is not an end, but a beginning, as humankind sets its sights on exploring further and further.
Well, I definitely am in line with the way we're going. I'd like to see us go back to the moon, set up a lunar base, and get used to actually living in different areas. Like, the station's a good start. People have to realize that we don't really have the technology or knowledge to go straight to the Mars. We have to learn how to do that kind of stuff and get the technology that we need. And the station is first teaching us how to live in space over a long period of time. It's a great stepping stone. And I do think it's man's need and goal to explore.
Behind every journey into space are people who are dedicated to mission safety and success. It is their combined efforts and their passion for their work that allows the space shuttle, the space station, and the vision for future exploration to take flight.
I've been fortunate in the past in that I've had an opportunity to visit a lot of our manufacturing facilities throughout the country. And one of the messages I take to them is that they can rest assured that even though the rest of the world might see 7 astronauts lifting off or 6 astronauts lifting off on the space shuttle, I guarantee them that the hearts and the souls of hundreds of thousands of workers across our country are on that space shuttle. When you talk to the engineers and you talk to the scientists and you talk to the people who work here at NASA, you recognize you're talking to people who are on a journey.
The people, hardware, and planning are all coming together. When Atlantis takes off with the crew of STS-117, it will be another exciting step in an ongoing journey of exploration.
The first space shuttle flight of 2007 is the second trip to the International Space Station for 2 of the astronauts on mission STS-117, and the third for the commander, who was on the first crew to ever go on board the station in orbit. This flight is the first shuttle command for Colonel Rick Sturko of the United States Marine Corps.
I'm from Lakeside, California. It was a pretty small rural town at the time. I didn't actually grow up in town. I grew up at a ranch about 5 miles from town, and we raised turkeys, and we had cattle, and we then later started into sort of a tree farming business. We had a variety of different trees that we sold.
But Rick was into race cars and racing cars.
I
got out of high school when I was 16, and I worked for 2 years at the International Harvester. I was a truck mechanic, a lube boy, did brake jobs, transmissions, that sort of thing. And I went to college at Cal Poly in San Luis Obispo to study mechanical engineering. They had a racing program there with the Society of Automotive Engineers, which is why I wanted to go there. And that's where I did a majority of my racing. And then I also did some stock car racing on my own car that I built and drove it on dirt tracks in California.
That's where his life took a big turn, from wheels to wings.
A professor who had been a Marine Corps pilot during the Vietnam War came up to me and said, "You ought to think about joining the Marines and being a pilot." And of course he made it sound very easy, like you just go down to the Marines and they paint your name on the side of an F-18, and it wasn't quite that simple, but things just worked out.
After flight school in 1987, Sturko was assigned to a fighter squadron in South Carolina for 4 years, a period that included a 7-month deployment to the Western Pacific. In 1990, he completed the Navy Top Gun fighter weapons training and was sent to Bahrain, from where he flew 41 combat missions in Operation Desert Storm. Then it was on to test pilot school, before being picked by NASA in 1994. His first space flight was as the pilot on STS-117, the first ever ISS assembly flight, joining the Unity node to the Zarya control module. He made a second trip in 2001, delivering the Expedition 3 crew to ISS. One crewmate from that flight is with him on this one. Pat Forrester is only recently retired from the job that he set his sights on when he was a young boy, a United States Army officer.
I grew up in a military family. My father had gone to the military academy and was a career officer, and I knew that's what I wanted to do too.
Forrester's family settled in Springfield, Virginia, where he graduated high school. He followed his father's footsteps to West Point, where he earned a bachelor's degree in applied sciences and engineering, then began his career in the infantry and as an airborne ranger.
Early on, I had just been picked up by a helicopter. I'd been a couple days without sleep, picked up in a what we call a PZ, a pickup zone, and was sitting in the helicopter with my feet hanging out, hungry and tired, and I looked up at the pilots, and one of them was eating a little box of chicken. I still remember, a little red and white box. And I said, I thought that this is what I wanted to do. That's what I want to do right there.
Forrester graduated from the Army Flight School and was assigned as an instructor pilot.
And it was during my early years of flying that I read an article about our first Army astronaut, which was General Bob Stewart. And I started thinking, wow, you know, you can do this thing that I love, which is being an Army officer. I think that's a really important role, and but also an astronaut. And it probably there is when my thoughts first started figuring out if that was something that I could really do.
He later got a master's degree in mechanical and aerospace engineering from the University of Virginia, served as a flight test engineer, and completed the Navy Test Pilot School before being assigned to the Johnson Space Center as an aerospace engineer in 1993. 3 years later, he was selected as an astronaut, and he made 2 spacewalks on his shuttle flight to the International Space Station in 2001. Forrester retired from the Army with the rank of colonel, the same as his father, in 2005. The other veteran spacewalker on the crew is Jim Riley, an Idaho native who grew up in the suburbs around Dallas, Texas. He traces his interest in spaceflight to the day John Glenn orbited Earth in his Mercury capsule. Riley was almost 8 and visiting the dentist.
And Dennis was a big space fan, listened to John's ground passes every time he went by. And after one that lasted about 15 minutes and he had stopped work and I'm just laying there with all this stuff in my mouth, he asked me if I ever thought I'd like to be an astronaut. I thought anything but here.
But he was hooked and made plans to become an astronaut by first becoming a fighter pilot.
Unfortunately, the end of the Vietnam War changed the number of pilots the military needed, so my path got changed a little bit. I went off to become a scientist. I worked as a geologist, worked in the Antarctic, and then went to work in the oil and gas industry for 17 years. But during that period, I never lost that dream of doing what I'm doing today.
Riley was chosen as an astronaut in 1994. In 1998, he flew on the Shuttle mission that delivered Andy Thomas to the Mir space station. In 2001, he made 3 spacewalks on the flight that delivered the Quest airlock to ISS, including the first EVA ever from that new module. Riley's spacewalking partner on this mission is first-time flyer Danny Olivas, a California native who grew up in El Paso, Texas.
The thing that I remember most about El Paso was the view at night. And I remember going up on my roof with my father, and we'd set the telescope up and we'd look at the moon. I just remember being awestruck by the fact that you had this just an enormous amount of space above us.
He got interested in the space program during a family trip to the Johnson Space Center in Houston when he was 7.
And I remember it was a time near the end of the Apollo era, and I remember coming through Teague Auditorium, which at the time was a museum, and I remember being just awestruck with what human beings had done.
It sparked an interest in science, an interest he maintained through elementary school and into junior high, along with the other natural interests of most teenage boys. He put in his first application to the astronaut corps when he graduated from the University of Texas, El Paso with a bachelor's in mechanical engineering. He worked in private industry while earning his master's in the same field at the University of Houston, and then got his doctorate at Rice University before joining NASA as a researcher at the Jet Propulsion Laboratory. He was selected for the astronaut corps in 1998.
You realize that the room we're sitting in right now to do this interview is the room that used to be the museum.
Yep, I sure do.
Another member of the class of 1998 is Steve Swanson. Born in Syracuse, New York, Swanson's family moved around a bit before settling in the small mountain town of Steamboat Springs, Colorado.
I've always wanted to do kind of exploring. As a kid, I loved to go in the woods and just go off and explore different areas. And heck, if I could have lived 200 years ago, I'd love to have been like with Lewis and Clark and just living in the woods and exploring all sorts of new areas. It would have been great as far as I'm concerned.
But he pursued the 20th century path of higher education, getting a bachelor's in engineering physics from the University of Colorado and a master's of applied science in computer systems from Florida Atlantic University. Then
I was trying to figure out at that point, I really need to get a job. It was time to really go to work, and it just kind of hit me at that moment that, this is a job I'm going to have for, 30, 40 years. At that moment, I started really going through all the possibilities of what I could do and what sounded fun and adventurous, but also though had used your brain a lot. It was challenging in all sorts of aspects, and the one that popped up at that time was the astronaut.
He was soon hired as a systems engineer in the Aircraft Operations Division at NASA's Johnson Space Center. And after earning a PhD in computer science at Texas A&M, he was selected to become an astronaut. The third member of that class making his first flight on STS-117 is Colonel Lee Archambault of the United States Air Force, born in the Chicago area town of Oak Park and raised in nearby Bellwood.
Well, going back to the 60s and 70s when I was growing up, certainly one of the more significant events in my lifetime was the first lunar landing. So I became interested in the space program back then. Bellwood has a real personal attachment to the space program because it's also the home of Eugene Cernan, the last man to walk on the moon. So back in the early 60s when Mr. Cernan was in the space program flying Gemini missions and eventually Apollo missions, he was the man in town, and he generated a lot of interest in the space program in our hometown.
Archambault studied aeronautical and astronautical engineering at the University of Illinois, earning bachelor's and master's degrees. Then he joined the Air Force and earned his pilot's wings in 1986. His operational assignments included 6 months in Saudi Arabia, from where he flew 22 combat missions in Operation Desert Storm. Later, it was test pilot school, and then weapons development testing, before NASA picked him as an astronaut. Archambault, Swanson, and Olivas are making their first spaceflight in the company of crewmates with a combined 57 days' experience in space during 5 previous shuttle missions.
Being on the threshold of picking up the countdown now for STS-117, we're pleased to have the entire astronaut flight crew here at the Kennedy Space Center to prepare for the launch. So I will introduce now to you Commander Rick Sturko, who will have a few comments, and then introduce the rest of his crew, who will also have a few remarks. Rick?
Good afternoon. It's great to be down here in Florida. We appreciate this great weather that you got for us today to fly in here. And if you can just get some weather like this for us on Friday evening, we'll really appreciate that too. The crew is very excited to be in Florida. We spent a long time training for this mission. As you know, we had a little bit of a setback. We were supposed to go in March. We especially appreciate all the great work that was done on ET-124, our external tank, the repair teams, and all the engineers and the testers, and everybody that pulled together from NASA to make that story come together and to get the tank ready to fly. We appreciate them very much. We just flew by the launch pad 39 Alpha on our way in here. It looks great. At this time, I'd like to introduce our PLT, Mr. Colonel Lee Archambault. Brew, come up here and please tell everybody what you're doing.
Hi, my name is Lee Archambault, and I'll be the pilot on the mission. My duties, in addition to assisting our commander on the flying duties, will be on orbit, will be the robotics arm operator. I'll be working both the space shuttle as well as the space station robotic arm, primarily assisting in the installation of the S3, S4 truss. Our next crew member I'll introduce is our MS-1, Colonel Pat Forrester.
I am Pat Forrester. I'm the MS-1. I'll be on the flight deck for launch and for re-entry. I'll be doing the second spacewalk and also be the prime arm operator for pulling the S3, S4 truss out of the bay. And next is Steve Swanson.
Hello, my name is Steve Swanson. I'll be MS-2 on this flight. I will be doing the second EVA along with Pat, and also being a robotic arm operator for both the shuttle arm and the station arm. And Dr. Daniel Levis is next.
Good afternoon. My name is Daniel Levis, and I'll be assisting gentlemen who will be coming up here in just a second, Mr. Jim Riley with the EVAs 1 and 3. I'll also be assisting in some of the shuttle robotics activities, as well as participating with CJ and Brew during the rendezvous. I'd like to introduce now Mr. Jim Riley.
Good afternoon. My name is Jim Riley, and sorry we're so late. Sorry to keep you all waiting for us, but we really appreciate the great weather, as CJ said, and I get an opportunity to lead a great team out here on the spacewalks and work with a great team all together here for our flight. And really looking forward to some great weather on Friday, and I appreciate everybody out here to support. Thanks very much. And I'd like to introduce Clay Anderson, who will be taken up to station on this flight.
Hi, my name's Clay Anderson, and my primary duty on 117 is to go uphill and replace Sunny Williams to allow her to come home and be with her friends and family. And then I'll be with the Expedition 15 and the Expedition 16 crews when Expedition 16 arrives sometime in October. So I'll turn it back over to Commander Sturkow.
All right, thanks a lot. Absolutely. Quick. Sure. Yeah, everybody turn toward the middle. Turn toward the middle and bunch it up. They like to get it closer. Thank you, guys.
Rick, that's great. Thanks a lot. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Got it. Very nice job. Thank you, sir.
No problem. Put maybe the big bucks for.
Good morning, everyone. This is the launch minus 1 day countdown status briefing for Atlantis and STS-117. Here to bring us the status this morning is Steve Payne, the NASA test director. Roy Worthy, the ETSRB NASA vehicle manager. Robbie Ashley, the STS-117 payload mission manager.
Good morning.
And Kathy Winters, the shuttle weather officer from the 45th Weather Squadron, Department of the Air Force.
Good morning.
And we'll begin first with the Atlantis launch vehicle status and Steve Payne. Steve?
Good morning, everybody. After many months of hard work, Atlantis is nearly ready to fly. Today is L-1 day, the day before launch. The countdown clock is currently at T-14 hours and counting. Our preparations are in work for vehicle loading tomorrow. Main engine avionics and pneumatic checkouts are in work. Our external tank inspections, our ground support equipment activation, and flight crew system storage are in work as well. We had a late start last night on our reactant load due to adverse weather we had in the area. However, this morning we finished it and we had a good load. We have all the hold time we had expected. So our plan for scrub turnarounds remains the same. We're currently tracking no significant issues on the vehicle. At 1 o'clock this afternoon, we'll be entering our T-11 hour hold. At that point, we'll begin configuring the launch pad for tomorrow evening's launch. Our late stowage and inspections will take place, and our access platforms will begin to be retracted. At about 10:30 tonight, the rotating service structure will be retracted, and upon completion, our xenon lights will be lit. At about 2:42 in the morning, the countdown clock will resume counting at T-11 hours. We'll then begin our final loading preparations and clear the launch pad by 2:42 in the morning. When loading preparations are complete, the shuttle managers are going to meet for their tanking weather briefing and evaluate whether we should load the tank. Our earliest tanking time would be 9:12 in the morning on Friday. Our flight crew will arrive at the pad in the afternoon and begin strapping in just after 4 p.m. No issues are currently being tracked, and we're ready to fly tomorrow.
Thank you, Steve. And now to Roy Worthy, the ETSRB NASA vehicle manager. Roy?
Thank you, George. Good morning. I was asked to support this panel because I was one of the team members here at KSC working on the repair effort of this tank that's out there at the pad right now. And I just want to emphasize a little bit about the team. It's not just KSC. We had NASA folks from Marshall Space Flight Center as well as MISU Assembly Facility out at Mass. And we had great support from our contractor, Lockheed Martin, both here and at MISU, as well as our contractor, USA here, and various other subcontractors that we'd worked with. We had a great deal of effort that we had to do for this repair work. We were in the VAB for 72 days worth of work in there. And I would like to emphasize, though, that we have done this type of work before. We had hail damage back in 1999 when we had to roll back from the pad. And we had, at that time, about 750 defects that we had to work through, versus this tank here has about 3,000 defects that we had to work through. But the repair technique was virtually the same for most of this. And that particular flight, STS-96, performed flawlessly. There was no foam liberation from those repairs. So that's one good data point that we have with us. But we're going to show you a tape here in a little while that's going to show two other what we call high-density areas. And if you want to hold off on that tape just for a minute, please. We've got two other areas of high density that we called, because the repairs, or I should say the defects, were so close to each other that we would have virtually ended up doing a repair on top of a repair. So Design Center decided that they would trim out those areas, trim down about a ½ inch, and that virtually took out all the repairs. But there were a few other areas that went down below that. And what you'll see in this tape in a little bit is they apply a red dye afterwards, and that red dye will follow any type of cracks or damaged areas. And then you'll see they'll actually sand it all down and to a complete white area that you kind of see out there now, but that's going to give a good base for the foam repair spray that they're about to do. So that particular type of work we have not done here at KSC before, but it has been done before out at MISU. A few years back when they had to remove the power ramp, that was the same type of spray that they used out there, but there were some slight deviations to that, and that's what got us to this extensive testing. Those changes that we did from there to here, the design center had to go through several barrages of testing between hot gas testing, vacuum testing, wind tunnel testing, those types of things anyway. So, and with that, if you want to go ahead and cue up the tape, and I'll kind of talk through that a little bit. This is the SRBs with the ET. The orbiter was on the other side. This is the scaffolding that they've installed. Our high crew did a tremendous effort installing the scaffolding here. Basically to get us to every area that we needed to get our hands on to do this repair work. And there on the right side, the high crew is installing another tower. And this is one of the high density areas that I was talking about. This is up at the nose cone, and you'll see all these defects there. And there's a lot more there that you can't quite see right now, so there's literally hundreds in there. And they're going to sand that down about 1/2 inch. They've got a debris catcher that they're installing there. They're going to sand this down about 1/2 inch, and that's what you see right there. He's already sanded it down, and he's applying the red dye right now. And after that red dye cures up, then they'll go into their sanding operation and chase down any additional defects that you see. And then there is a second area a little bit further down the tank that they virtually did the same thing, sanded down, and then applied the BX spray. That's this area you see on your left right there. And then those little dots that you see are individual repairs right there. Those are some hard molds over the foam application, and there's virtually about 1,000 of those. And this is a technician just doing some final trim after a foam closeout. And this is another technician that you'll see here with a trimming tool, trimming down to the appropriate depth for a good foam application. And here's the actual BX spray that they're doing up on the nose cone area. And they're spraying on about as much as they took off, right around 1/2 inch. And then MISU and Marshall developed a trim tool that they use, or I should say modified a trim tool that they use out at MISU to do the trimming up in that area, because that area needs to be very smooth due to the Gox fin arm that comes around that area. And this is after they've already done the spray, and the technicians are working on the modified trim tool that we got from MISU. And it's like a little drum sander that's going on, and they're manually pulling that around. And you'll see the technicians behind vacuuming up the debris and those types of things. So they needed a real smooth surface for the Gox fin arm to make that to the sealing surface. And that's a scaffolding that they build up right there in the middle that those gentlemen are standing on. And a lot of the other folks you see out there are our technicians, engineers waiting to get in there as well, because that was man-loaded for only 2 persons, and we had to get those folks out before we could get the other folks back in to look at their buys. But lastly, I guess I'd like to finish up saying that this is the same type of work that we performed on STS-96 with no foam loss. The high-density areas was exhaustively tested and vetted through our engineering community, as well as there was 2 independent review teams put together, one primarily of NASA and one of Lockheed Martin. Both found no findings or issues with the repair techniques that we did out here at KSC and they recommended proceeding with launch. So with that, we have complete confidence in our repair techniques, and we expect it to perform, as did STS-96, and we feel that we were safe and we're ready to fly. And with that, I'll turn it back to George.
All right, thank you, Roy. And now to discuss the STS-117 payload status is Robbie Ashley.
Thank you, George. Good morning. The S3-S4 payload is safely installed in the orbiter's payload bay, and the payload bay doors were closed Tuesday of this week. We finished our last battery charge on the Element on Monday, just prior to our final closeouts, and rolled right into door closure Tuesday. We have no work remaining for the S3-S4 Element. Essentially, we are ready for launch and excited to get into the final throes of the countdown tomorrow. I guess, George, let's see, I believe we do have a video that highlights some of the processing of this tape. What we're looking at here is NASA's Super Guppy heavy lift aircraft arriving at the Shuttle landing facility, and this was back in December of 2000 with the S3 Element, which was flown here from Tulsa, Oklahoma, and Boeing's facility out there where the primary structure was manufactured. And this is actually 3 years later, in 2004, and this is our key ceremony. It's signifying the transfer of ownership of the S3 and S4 cargo element from the Boeing company to the government. And presenting the key for the Boeing company is Chuck Hardison, the senior manager for flight element processing here, and that's the rest of the team that you see there that were involved in the at that point 3 years of processing, getting the S3-S4 element ready. And what we're looking at now is S3-S4. In 2006, we had just completed replacement of 6 of the flight batteries, and we are lifting the element back to its primary processing stand, where we will complete all of its final testing. This was in September of last year, and this is out at the launch pad actually in January of this year. They're rolling back the rotating service structure at the pad in preparation for payload delivery. This was in January of this year, and it had been 4 years since that rotating service structure had been rotated due to the mod period at Pad A. And now S3-S4 is being lifted and transferred to its payload canister, which we use to take the payload out to the pad. This is in February of this year. We're being installed in the canister, as you see now. And now we are vertical in the same payload canister at the canister rotation facility, and this is February 12th of this year, on our way out to the launch pad. About a 3.5 hour trip out to the launch pad. And you can see we're passing the vehicle assembly building, and the launch pad beautifully lit up in the early morning hours. And now the payload canister is being hoisted up on the pad surface to the 135-foot level of the rotating service structure, where our payload changeout room awaits. And this is inside the payload changeout room, opening the canister doors and preparing to install the payload or extract it from the canister and into the payload changeout room. And finally, this is the payload ground handling mechanism that is used in the payload changeout room for that extraction. It's also used, not shown here, but used to install the payload in the orbiter's payload bay. So that's a quick summary of just over 6 years of processing here at KSC. The last 4 months have been a little bit unusual for us. We spent that time out at the launch pad waiting in the PCR and anxiously looking back westward at the VAB and all of the work that Roy and the team were accomplishing there, as he just described a few minutes ago. And we're very appreciative of all of that hard work. We know that a lot of folks sacrificed a lot to get us where we are today, and we thank that team and the entire shuttle team, and we look forward to launch tomorrow, getting the S3, S4 element on orbit where it is intended to continue the assembly of the space station. And significant for this element is it kind of marks a transition. It will, with the power capability that it will bring to the station, it will support the later addition of the international partner elements, the European Space Agency, Columbus module, and the Japanese laboratory module. So it's an exciting time for the space station and for all of us. And that's all I have, George.
All right, thank you, Robbie. And now for a look at the weather forecast for tomorrow is Kathy Winters.
Good morning. Well, we did have some significant weather in the area last night. Luckily, most of it came together down in Melbourne as opposed to up here over the launch pad. It did delay some of the ops a little bit, but generally all the weather came together over the western portion of Melbourne and back towards the west. And there was 3/4 inch hail in the area down in West Melbourne, but no hail here at Kennedy Space Center. Today the weather is going to be a little bit better. We still have a chance for some afternoon thunderstorms, but the ridge, the high pressure ridge that was down to the south, which was allowing us to have the southwesterly flow that allows good sea breeze convergence when the sea breeze sets up, that's now more of a southerly wind. So when the sea breeze forms, the storms will actually develop more off to the west. So right around the western side of Kennedy Space Center, or maybe even a little bit further off to the west, the storm should develop along the sea breeze and then gradually progress very slowly off to the west with the storms training along the sea breeze towards the north. And so because of that, we shouldn't see too much significant weather right at the launch pad today. Let's go ahead and look at our satellite picture. Looking at the satellite picture, you can see we do have some cloud cover lingering in the area from the weather we had last night. One thing we are watching is a little bit of a wave that may be developing off over the area of the Bahamas. If that does occur, at least one of the models is trying to progress that wave a little bit back towards the west after it starts having some shower activity. So that's something we'll be watching over the next couple of days, but shouldn't be as much of an issue on launch day. Let's go ahead and look at our tanking forecast. Moving to the tanking forecast, you can see no change here on this forecast from what we had yesterday. Weather still looks good with light winds. The humidity will be high that morning at 94%, but we do have a 0% chance of weather prohibiting tanking. Moving to our launch forecast, weather still looking good. Actually, we think it looks a little bit better. Yesterday we thought some inland thunderstorms might still be close enough to affect us, but today we're more confident that there'll be more inland due to the fact the ridge is definitely going to be up to the north. So just a 20% chance of KSC weather prohibiting launch. For our SRB recovery forecast, we still are concerned about isolated showers and thunderstorms in the area, but just 2 to 3 foot seas, so overall very workable weather for SRB recovery. And for the U.S. Landing sites, these are provided by Spaceflight Meteorology Group. We have good weather at both Northrop and Edwards for the first day. And for the Cal sites, also good weather for both locations on day one. If we do happen to delay 24 hours, we are concerned about both showers and also a chance of isolated thunderstorms in the area. We're still going to be watching that wave off to the east, and the ridge, though, does look like it will be to the north now, so we got a little bit more confident on this day, and we decreased the number from 40% that we had yesterday to a 30% chance of KSC weather prohibiting launch. And for the U.S. landing sites, the weather, there is a slight chance for some thunderstorms at Northrop, but weather still looks good at Edwards. And for the overseas sites, we do have a chance of thunderstorms within 20 nautical miles at Zaragoza. And if we happen to delay 48 hours, we are still concerned on this day about a few things. That wave, if it does develop, may back up towards our area and influence us more. It also could have more of a southwesterly wind, which would again allow that sea breeze convergence to occur. And so with that, we have a 40% chance of KSC weather prohibiting launch. And for the U.S. Landing sites, still look good. All 3 days they look good. And for the overseas sites, a little bit worse on this day. There is a ceiling at Zaragoza at 10,000 feet with the chance of thunderstorms within 20 nautical miles. And in France, there's a ceiling 25,000 feet with the chance of thunderstorms within 20 nautical miles. So overall, the first day is the best day for the overseas sites and the U.S. sites, and also for Kennedy Space Center with a 20% chance of KSC weather prohibiting launch. George.
Thank you, Kathy. And we're ready to take questions. Please give your name and affiliation when the microphone comes to you. We'll start here in the front with Jay.
Steve, I was told that the weather put you down 7 hours last night, and that this morning you were still down about 5 hours. But it sounds like what you said a while ago, that you've made up for that already, or?
Well, because this particular operation is sensitive to weather holding us up, we don't generally tank with lightning. We have some built-in hold recovery time in the SU-7 bar chart. So we can absorb some of this fairly easily by just running operations in parallel. So you factor that in, we're only a couple down. And we should be caught up by this afternoon.
But if you get weather this afternoon, it sounds like what Kathy told us, that it's going to be pretty good to see breeze to keep it in. But if you should get what you got yesterday, would that put you down another 5 or 6 hours?
No. The operations tonight aren't nearly as sensitive to weather as that, and Kathy's promised me good weather tonight.
Kathy keeps her promises.
We have RSS retract tonight, but we aren't expecting any severe weather for that, so it should be good weather for RSS retract.
Okay, thank you.
David?
David Waters from Central Florida News 13. So just to follow up, what is the maximum amount of time you think you could absorb if any more weather came through and just popped up?
It depends on what else is going on. On a clean day, we can take 7 hours and recover without too much ado. When there's a lot of other stuff piled on, it gets a little more challenging for us. But again, by running operations in parallel and playing catch-up, we can generally get back where we're supposed to be.
Yeah. Todd?
Todd Halverson of Florida Today with a couple. First for Kathy, I'm wondering if you can discuss the weather conditions, the humidity at 94%, and whether that might contribute to ice buildup on the tank, and I have a follow.
It is going to be humid. It always is when we have a morning tanking time in the summer. We always have high humidity. It's standard, really. Humidity actually can help when it comes to the ice formation on the tank. It's actually considered a good thing. You have less chance of getting ice on the tank because of the humid air, keeping the air more moderate on the outside of the tank, as it doesn't change temperature as quickly. So because of that, it actually helps you. And even in our launch commit criteria, when we're dealing with cold temperature and humidity, actually buys us some green, if you will, on our charts, because it is a good thing and keeps that temperature moderate on the outside of the tank. So it's really overall a warm, humid day. So when it comes to ice formation on the external tank, it's usually something the ice team, when they're looking at it, they like to see the kind of weather that we're giving them on the ice team forecast.
Thanks, and for I guess for Roy, I'm wondering if you anticipate any change in the amount of ice that would build up on the tank because of the repairs that were made to it, and for Steve, whether there are any changes that you would anticipate in terms of the ice team inspection, if they're doing anything different as a result of the repair work.
I'll take that one. But no, we're not expecting any different ice buildup. That was the procedures that we've got in place, our repair techniques. No, we don't expect any different ice buildup. As far as anything different, we already have a robust procedure in place for going out there inspecting. The ice frost team goes out there. They go out there with infrared cameras, binoculars, telescopes, that kind of thing, and walk the tank down entirely and see if there's any problems. The only thing they're doing different this time was they have a more advanced infrared camera to where they can get resolution from 70 foot for about 3/4 of an inch, where in the past it was about 1.5 inches. And because of the amount of damage up there, some of these repairs were used as is. The damage was very minimal, so it was used as is, but the ice frost team might go up there and see some of that area there, and if some of the markings may have come off, because all these individual ones were marked, if some of the markings may have come off, they will have a detailed map with them to where they can determine the location of that, and then they can determine if that's one of our repair techniques or one of the repairs, or if it's new damage, and then they can call that back into the engineering community and we can take a look at that.
All right, let's go back to Mark.
Mark Carreau from the Houston Chronicle, and my question is for Mr. Ashley. I believe you said in an earlier briefing that you last charged the batteries on the solar power module, I think Monday. I was just wondering when, if there wasn't a launch, when you would have to do that again and how long that takes.
Good. Yes, we did charge the batteries last on Monday, and typically, if we weren't looking at a launch, we would plan to charge the batteries every 14 days. The charging operation itself takes now, and we've gotten a lot of practice out at the launch pad, more than we expected, but it takes about 5 to 6 hours if there are no issues that we have to work in parallel. So about 5 to 6 hours, and again, we have been doing it every 14 days. I will tell you that we have the ability to go much longer than that if we get into a launch delay scenario, and we did to assist and protect for that, we put a higher than normal state of or charge on the batteries just to buy us additional margin. So from a battery perspective, we're in as best shape as we can be.
All right, over here.
John Schwartz, New York Times. I guess this is for Steve Payne. Could you just describe some of the precautions you're taking on pressure vessels and how you're monitoring that situation for this launch, please? Thanks.
Okay. We pressurize our composite overwrap pressure vessels a few days before launch, about 4 days prior to launch. During the pressurization process, we clear everybody out of the pad because when you're changing the pressure is when the risk is highest. So we clear all personnel out. We do it in 2 stages because when you compress gases, they heat up. So we do it in 2 stages so that you go to a certain percentage and then you let it cool down. And then you finish the pressurization in the second stage hours later so that it can cool down and you don't exceed any temperatures. So it minimizes the stress on the tanks. Once they're pressurized, we take measures to make sure that only personnel at the pad are only those that have to be at the pad. We've really cut down on who can come and go from the pad late in count. And we've distributed safety notices and told the workforce that it's best to be elsewhere rather than at the pad once the tanks are pressurized.
Any further questions? All right, up here in the front to Mike.
Hi, Mike Schneider, Associated Press. Just a question for Kathy on what the weather is looking like for the beginning of next week.
Well, right now the weather does look like the ridge actually moves back up to the north for the early portion of next week, and that would put us in a pattern where we would be watching isolated coastal showers in the morning, and then in the afternoon we'd get good sinking air behind the sea breeze, and actually would clear things out. So the launch time gets earlier, and we kind of get in that time period where we get the subsidence behind the sea breeze, and it'll last to the launch time. So it looks good in the early portion of the week. As we get later in the week, the ridge starts to shift back down a little bit, so we may start getting more afternoon thunderstorms by late in the week.
Any further questions? All right, in that event, our next event relative to the launch will be our launch coverage, which starts tomorrow afternoon at 1:30 p.m. Eastern Time. Thank you very much. Robbie, did you get coordinated with
From Launch Complex 39 at the Kennedy Space Center in Florida, this is Shuttle Launch Control at T-minus 3 hours and holding. We are now in the final 6 hours of the countdown for the launch of Atlantis on mission STS-117, the 21st mission for construction of the International Space Station. The countdown is being controlled from firing room 4 at the Launch Control Center. And right now we are on schedule for liftoff at 7:38 p.m. Eastern Time. STS-117 is planned to last 11 days with 2 possible extension days. Landing is currently planned to occur on Tuesday, June 19th at 2:44 p.m. Eastern Time. This is the 118th launch of the Space Shuttle program, the 28th launch of Space Shuttle Atlantis, and the 19th flight to the International Space Station. Astronauts have been living continuously on the space station now for the last 6.5 years. We're going now into the breakfast and the dining room. We see our crew.
Here we have Clay Anderson seated at the end of the table. He's gone to the space station to replace Sonny Williams. Sitting next to him is MS4, Jim Riley, our EV1 for STS-117. Seated next to Jim is Danny Olivas. Danny's going to be the MS3 and EV2 for the mission. There's Steve Swanson. He's the MS2 and another one of our spacewalkers. Sitting next to him is Pat Forrester. And at the other end of the table we have Colonel Lee Archambault and Colonel Rick Sturco, our PLT and commander.
And at this point, they're about to have lunch, I assume.
Yes, sir, they are. They've been up for a few hours now, and they're going to have a meal and then proceed to the suit room to get suited up after their weather briefing.
And here we are in the suit-up room. Dex, can we tell who we got there?
Yeah, that's the commander. That's Rick Sturco, and the pilot, Colonel Lee Archambault, getting his boots laced up there. Lee's the pilot. He's also one of the space station robotic arm operators. That looks like Pat Forrester, the MS1 for the flight. He'll go uphill and do the entry on the flight deck, sitting behind the pilot. Pat's a retired Army colonel. And there's Clay Anderson. Clay's MS5 for the ascent portion of the flight, and he's gone up to the space station to replace Sonny Williams, who's coming home on this flight. Clay will come home on STS-120 in October. Looks like he's excited and ready to go, doesn't it? Clay is one of my classmates and became an astronaut with me in 1998. There's Jim Riley. Jim's EV1 for the flight. He'll take part in 2 of the spacewalks and then be the IV coordinator for the 3rd spacewalk. Jim's also a Navy reservist. And at one point he was the, I think he told me he was the oldest ensign in the Navy. There's Danny Olivas. Danny, also from the 98 astronaut class, is the MS3 for the flight. He's on 2 of the spacewalks with Jim Riley, and I know he's excited and ready to go as well. We've been waiting a long time for this.
Hooked up there, what's connected to the helmet?
Yeah, Steve is doing his final pressurization checks. This is Steve Swanson, the MS2 for the flight, and also one of the spacewalkers. And he's doing his final pressurization checks. The suit is a pressurized suit, and we want to make sure there aren't any leaks in it. And the helmet is an integral part of that. And so they close it up and do final pressure checks and also make sure the communications gear works while it's pressurized.
This is Shuttle Launch Control, T-minus 2 hours, 55 minutes, 9 seconds and counting. We see our STS-117 flight crew is now leaving the suit-up room. Dex, what are they thinking right now?
They're just real excited. They're ready to go. They're ready to get strapped into the vehicle, and they're concentrating on the mission. As you can see, you get the flight crew and our chief astronaut, Steve Lindsay, and one of the insertion techs and management personnel are on the elevator with them, and they'll take that down to the first floor and head out in just a few minutes. And here comes the crew. Rick Sturco and Lee Archambault leading the crew out. And there's Steve Swanson and Pat Forrester. And in the back row, Daniel Levis and Jim Riley, and there's Clay Anderson. Those suits are quite warm, and inside of the Astrovan is nice and air conditioned, and they've got some liquid cooling lines that they can hook up to and stay cool inside the suits until they get out to the pad. There's astronaut Jerry Ross and Steve Lindsay, and Mike Bloomfield, our Deputy Flight Crew Operations Director, is going to join them on the Astrovan there. Looks like the commander has entered the crew module now. This view is provided by a camera that's installed by the astronaut support personnel there, and it's kept in the crew module just before hatch closure. So Mike's going to help CJ into his seat. So this view is in the commander's side window, George, looking across the flight deck, and here we see CJ laying on his back, he's looking forward through the forward windows. Mike is standing on the aft windows. We have some hard platforms that we put in place on those windows so that it can support his weight while he's helping the crew get strapped in and finishing the final checks. You can see that he's got a headset on and he can communicate with the crew, but also with personnel here in the firing room, the NTD and the orbiter test conductor, for any switches that need to be moved after the crew gets strapped in. George, we got a view here from a mid-deck camera that's attached to the mid-deck wall over on the starboard or the right side of the vehicle, and you're looking toward the hatch here. So Jim's entering the vehicle, and he's walking along a piece of fabric that we stretch out, call it the trampoline, and it allows you to walk across the mid-deck there without stepping on any bags or any other gear. So now Jim's taking his seat, and Mike Thompson will help him get strapped in as well.
OTC, OVCC. Go ahead, OVCC.
And George, this view is another camera that on the flight deck. It's been moved over to the pilot side now, and we can see Lee Archambault getting into his seat. He's standing up on the MS2 seat right now, and he'll use some handholds up forward to help him get into position, and then Mike Good will make sure he's in the right position as he enters the seat. It's a little tricky getting in without bumping any switches. Again, with that bulky suit on and fairly small quarters, you want to make sure that you don't bump anything. Lee's up and over the hump there and put his feet down in the footwell. And
OTC, CBSA. Go ahead. OTC, OVCC. Go, OVCC. MS2 is board at 1658.
And Swanee's now in the MS2 seat. And you can see the camera looking down at him right now. Steve is the MS2 or flight engineer, and he'll be assisting CJ and Brew with the nominal procedures going during the ascent and also on entry. And he's responsible for keeping track of all the nominal timeline operations and the checklists and making sure that everything's followed.
This is some tile inspection activities that were underway earlier this year. And this is the installation of the remote manipulator arm and the booms that used for the orbiter's inspection once in space. Actually, this was back in October of 2006. This was a conclusion of the solid rocket booster stacking activities in the vehicle assembly building earlier this year, just after the new year on January 5th. It's one of the giant rainbirds there that flood the water of the mobile launcher platform at launch. And there we see the twin solid rocket boosters waiting for the external tank to come over and be mated to the twin boosters. There's the tank in its test cell where it had been undergoing checkout. And it's now out of its test cell, moving toward the solid rocket booster stack. And here is Atlantis being prepared for its rollover to the vehicle assembly building from its hangar, Orbiter Processing Facility Bay 1. This was in February of this year. February the 7th. This is the short 20-minute tow from the hangar over to the vehicle assembly building transfer aisle. And Atlantis was then attached to its lifting sling and rotated to vertical in preparation for mating to the external tank solid rocket booster stack. They're now in the vertical position. Atlantis now gradually being lowered into position next to the external tank. This was in last February. And that then took us to the rollout after the shuttle interface test between the orbiter, the tank, and the boosters. About a 3.8 mile trip from the vehicle assembly building out to launch pad 39A. And there we can see the hail damage to the external tank, which occurred after the hailstorm on the 27th of February. And a decision was then made to roll back to the vehicle assembly building so that the hail damage could be repaired. That rollback that we're now seeing occurred on March the 4th. And at that point, the access platforms were put back into position around Atlantis, and some special scaffolding was erected for access to this area of the tank. The nose cone area was the area of highest density where repairs were necessary. You can see the sanding down of some of these spots and the special access placed around the tank to get to these locations. Some of this red dye put on the tank after sanding down looks for either cracks or divots in the tank. And then that is then sanded down. And this is the lower area of the tank where there were somewhat fewer hits, but in this particular area a decision was made to sand down that entire spot and patch it. Here's one of the sanding operations on one of the smaller divots that was repaired. Total of almost 3,000 hits on Atlantis' tank that were repaired. That took us back to roll out again, which occurred on May 15th. This was not the first time that we had had hail damage to a tank. The last time this occurred was on STS-117 in 1999, but there were only about 750 hits to be repaired in that case. This had a higher rate of hits and more area to be covered, so it took somewhat of an innovative approach to do the repairs, which were done over a total of about 73 days. Joining us now here in the firing room at the Public Affairs Console is Robbie Ashley. He was the STS-117 payload mission manager here at the Kennedy Space Center and had much to do with preparing these trusses for flight. Robbie, welcome. And these segments have been here for a while. How far back does preparations for this flight go?
And that's right, George. These elements actually showed up in December of 2000 for the S3 element, and January 2001, a month later, for the S4 element. So it's been a little over 6 years since they've been here, and we've had a lot of folks working on them over that time frame.
Well, we'll go ahead and roll some tape now, and perhaps you can give us some idea of some of the activities that we're seeing that prepared these truss segments for launch.
Okay, I'd be glad to. This is NASA's Super Guppy heavy lift cargo aircraft landing at the Shuttle landing facility, and this is back in December of 2000. It's bringing the S3 element from Tulsa, Oklahoma, where it was the primary structure was manufactured out there at the Boeing facility in Tulsa. And as you can see, they've opened the entire nose cone of the Guppy aircraft opens up to get access to the cargo bay, and now they're extracting the S3 element inside its shipping fixture from the cargo bay hull and transporting it over to our payload processing facility. It's not shown on the video, but the S4 element, as I mentioned, arrived a month later, and it actually made the trip across country from Tulsa over the road on a special truck. And this is actually 3 years later, in 2004, after we've had initially completed work on the S3 and S4 elements, and this is the traditional key ceremony that we have in Space Station, signifying the transfer of ownership of the hardware from the Boeing company to the government. And this is Chuck Hardison, the senior manager for flight element processing here for the Boeing company, presenting the key to, that is Scott Gehring, who was leading up the vehicle office for the space station program at the time. And here's part of our larger team that worked on the S3 and S4 elements, getting them ready. And here we are jumping forward again. This is in September of 2006. We had just completed replacement of the 6 batteries on the lower deck of the S4 element, and we're bringing the integrated element back over to its normal processing stand following that battery change out. And once over there, we will complete all of our final testing that we need to do, that we had to do as a result of changing out those batteries, and then prepare the element for launch. And this is actually a shot out at the launch pad, as you can see, of the rotating service structure at Pad A. And this is their first retraction of the rotating service structure since January of 2003, excuse me. So they'd had quite a lot of work going on in the 4 years, and this is in January 2007, retracting in preparation for payload delivery to the pad. Here we are back in the Space Station Processing Facility, preparing the S3, S4 element for transfer out to the launch pad, lifting it out of its work stand, and it's on its way to the opposite end of the building, where we will install it in the payload transportation canister for the trip to the pad. This is a good shot of the forward bulkhead, of the S3 bulkhead that will attach to S1 on orbit. And now, as you can see, we're approaching the payload canister for that installation. And lowering the cargo element into the payload canister. And that's a close-up shot of the solar alpha rotary joint there, blanketed. That's the joint that rotates the solar arrays outboard for tracking with the sun. And here we are over at the canister rotation facility. We've been rotated to vertical in the payload canister, and we're on our way out to the launch pad. This is February 12th of this year. There's a beautiful shot of the canister as it passes the vehicle assembly building in the early morning hours of February 12th. And I love this view here with the launch pad lit up in the early morning hours. And this is a payload canister being hoisted up from the base of the pad to the payload changeout room at the 135-foot level of the rotating service structure. And now we're inside the payload changeout room and opening the payload canister doors in preparation for extracting the S3, S4 element and putting it into the payload changeout room. And I don't believe we have it on this video, but the shot that you're seeing here looks very much like the S3, S4 in the orbiter's payload bay. Those doors that you see there are very similar to the payload bay doors for the orbiter. That's a close-up shot of one of the solar array wings, the 2 blanket boxes that you see there in the mass canister. And this is the top half of the S3 element with the solar alpha rotary joint. And now we're seeing the payload ground handling mechanism being brought forward to extract the S3, S4 element out of the payload canister. And that has occurred now, and the payload canister door is closed.
Robbie, what's the significance of the payloads for this mission in terms of where it fits into the assembly sequence? In other words, why are we doing this now compared to what's coming?
Right. Well, the S3, S4 element, it's very much like the P3, P4 that we launched back in September of last year. Its primary purpose is that it provides power for the station. Significant of the S3, S4 element is that it will be providing the power necessary to continue the assembly of the station and specifically starting the addition of the international partner elements, the Columbus module and the Japanese experiment modules. So it's significant in that it will be providing the power for those elements.
Well, Robbie, thank you very much, and I'm sure your team is excited. Have you any estimate about how many folks have worked over this over time or are on your team?
You know, I don't have a good number. I know it's in the thousands. If you consider, you know, going back to all the way back to the plants where the hardware was initially manufactured, and then the team here, we've had a large number of folks that have worked on it. Some have gone on to other things. It's been, as I mentioned earlier, it's been over 6 years, but a lot of folks are looking out at the launch pad today with excitement that S3, S4 is now on the verge of being launched and headed to the space station.
Well, Robbie, thanks very much, and best of luck for tonight.
All right, well, the U.S. Space Agency says things are looking good for tonight's launch of the space shuttle Atlantis. Liftoff set for 23:38 GMT. NASA says the launch is an 80% go at this point. Atlantis and its 7 astronauts will deliver 2 new segments and also some energy-producing solar panels, delivering that to the International Space Station. They're also going to swap out an astronaut while they're there. The shuttle was originally supposed to take off in March, but there was damage from a hailstorm in February, just a little before that, and that forced this long delay.
Lots of dings on the top of the shuttle nose cone there, which now wears a special guard.
Seen incredibly severe storms from tornadoes impacting a large area. Well, more of that throughout the day today and even into tomorrow. We're going to see these mainly affecting parts of Ohio, Indiana, and Kentucky. That means hail, strong winds, and the risk for more of these tornadoes. Plus, add the very warm temperatures, not just across the Midwest, but into the Northeast and down into the Southeast as well. Temperatures in those mid-30s here into Atlanta, all the way into parts of Texas. Better weather for the west, dry across California. The Pacific Northwest will see much of the shower activity and a little bit cooler temperatures heading into Vancouver. 13 degrees expected for this Saturday. Incredibly warm in Dallas, 32, 35 in Atlanta, as I was mentioning, and mid-20s from the Midwest all the way into parts of the Northeast, and that's going to continue there with a risk for some of those storms. Across Europe, we're seeing better weather into parts of the east. The major showers confined to central regions all the way into parts of central Med. We're seeing better weather into Portugal and Spain, but by the end of the weekend, that's where we're going to see the increase of those showers once again, but very warm temperatures indeed. Nice conditions for Scandinavia, plenty of...
And we'll see if the weather is going to hold up for the launch of the space shuttle Atlantis, scheduled in just over an hour.
The forecast for the region not looking bad. We have seen thunderstorms, but most of them have been across the southern part of Florida. Assia, back to you.
Okay, we'll be watching the weather, Martin. Well, this is NASA's first shuttle flight of the year, and joining us to talk about it more is Miles O'Brien. Miles, obviously the weather is going to be a concern till that last minute, isn't it?
It always is a concern, but so far, Assia, the picture is good here. Take a look at this spectacular picture of the space shuttle Atlantis. About 3 miles behind me here at the Kennedy Space Center off Florida's East Coast. We've been listening to the shuttle pilots who go up in a specially rigged Gulfstream jet and fly around looking at the weather here, trying to get a visual, just to put an eyeball on the weather. And they have reported nothing that would preclude the space shuttle from launching in about an hour and 20 minutes or so. So if everything goes well with the vehicle, there's a good chance we're going to see a launch to the International Space Station very shortly. The 7-person crew is on board. I want to take a look at the top of the external fuel tank of Atlantis. This area right here I'm going to highlight for you. That area back in February was pummeled by hail bigger than the size of a golf ball. It caused hundreds and hundreds of divots in the foamy external surface of the external tank. There is insulation. It forced the, NASA to make the decision to roll the Space Shuttle Atlantis back to the hangar, take the orbiter off, and redo that tank. It was a very laborious process. It had never been done before, but NASA says they are now ready to go and that this tank is safe. The 7-person crew, as I say, strapped in, and the shuttle is loaded up with the hundreds and thousands of gallons of liquid hydrogen and liquid oxygen, which is the rocket fuel which will take it to the space station. On board, they have a big, huge piece of a solar array, which measures stem to stern. It's at least right about 100 meters from tip to tip when it's unfolded. They'll conduct 3 spacewalks to attach it properly and greatly increase the electrical capacity of the International Space Station. And they're carrying with them a little bit of human cargo. They're bringing up a crew member, astronaut Clay Anderson, who'll spend 4 months on board the space station, and bringing back home NASA astronaut Sonny Williams, who has been up there for now about 6 months. So it's a busy 12 days ahead for the crew, and weather permitting, we'll see a launch fairly shortly.
Miles, very quickly, what is it that they are doing right now? I know they're dressed to go, strapped in. Is there any kind of communication going on, or are they just waiting in silence?
Well, basically the communication that we hear between the Launch Control Center and Mission Control, they've gone through all of those communication checks, and now the radios are pretty silent, and they're talking amongst themselves. They're going through checklists. I'm told most times these are pretty quiet times for the crew, focused on what lies ahead, looking at their gauges, making sure everything that they have done is what they should do, making sure that they are not the ones that make some sort of mistake. The astronauts, more than anything, say they don't get scared at this moment. If they're scared of anything, they're scared of making a big mistake. Asya?
And hopefully that will not happen. Thank you very much. Miles O'Brien joining us from the Kennedy Space Center. I'm Asiya Namdar. World Sport is next. I'll be back with the headlines. Stay with us. In about an hour, the space shuttle Atlantis is scheduled to blast off to the International Space Station. The shuttle will deliver parts for the space station and a new crew member. The launch was delayed from March after the shuttle was damaged in a storm. The first time this year, a space shuttle is set to lift off. In about 20 minutes from now, space shuttle Atlantis is scheduled to blast off for a mission to the International Space Station. We go to CNN's Miles O'Brien for more. Miles, is everybody ready?
Just over. Everybody's ready, and there's some questions right now. Interestingly, the only question right now is the weather in Europe. Here's the situation. The space shuttle right now is doing just fine. The countdown has been virtually flawless. And the weather here at the Kennedy Space Center on the east coast of Florida looks pristine. Matter of fact, take a look at these pictures. There's not a cloud in the sky there. And as you look at the Space Shuttle Atlantis out there, the 7-member crew is in that tiny little part up there in the front. In the back part, in the trunk, if you will, of the shuttle, or the boot, depending on where you are right now, is a 16,000 kilogram solar array, which will extend its wings 76 meters tip to tip, assuming all goes well with this mission, on the 3 spacewalks to attach it to the International Space Station. By the way, just take a look up here. You'll see a little bit of steam coming off the top and steam coming out the bottom. It's not really steam. At the top, it's venting liquid oxygen. At the bottom, it's venting liquid hydrogen, which actually turns immediately into its gaseous form, but it's very cold. Liquid hydrogen is the coldest thing we know of on this planet, as a matter of fact. The crew, as we say, is all strapped in, ready to go in their orange pressure suits. They've been on board for a couple of hours now, and now going through their checklists and everything they've done. And as I've said, they haven't had a single problem to report with this countdown. Amazingly, as NASA likes to call it, clean countdown. As I say, they're on their way to the space station with this huge solar array, which will be a very complicated process to attach it, using the robotic arm built by the Canadians on the space shuttle, as well as the robotic arm also built by the Canadian firm, same firm, on the International Space Station to transfer this 16,000 kilogram item onto the International Space Station and deploy those solar arrays. In addition to that, they're taking up some human cargo. Astronaut Clay Anderson, American astronaut, will be swapped out, will spend 4 months on the space station. Coming down, NASA astronaut Sonny Williams, who's been up there for 6 months. We're watching very closely now the weather in Spain and France, because if they lose an engine or two, depending on where it is on their rise to orbit, and they have to abort and land in Europe, they have to have good weather at one of these sites at 2 air bases, one in Spain, one in France. And right now, one of them, the weather is no good. The other one, it was no good up until a moment ago, just went good enough. So we'll watch that one very closely. It's all supposed to unfold before our eyes in just about 20 minutes. Back to you.
So, Miles, basically, we may not know whether the Atlantis will lift off or not until just a few seconds before 7:38 Eastern Time.
Exactly. They'll take it right down to the minute, go as close as they can to the launch. The only weather that counts is the weather that is predicted and exists in a 5-minute narrow window. Basically, the space shuttle is trying to meet up with something that's traveling around the globe at 25,000 kilometers per hour. And in order to do that, it has to launch at just the right moment. If they miss that moment, they got to wait till the next day.
Got it. Thank you very much, Miles O'Brien from the Kennedy Space Center. And speaking of weather, we want to take it over to Martin Jeans, who's got that. Also, the international weather forecast. Martin, what do you have?
Well, as Miles has been saying, certainly in Florida, the weather looking great for that launch of Space Shuttle Atlantis in just a few minutes' time. But as he also mentioned, the problem, of course, continuing across Spain and France. In Europe, those 2 emergency landing sites where certainly the weather is a lot more unsettled than we're seeing in Florida. So we hope for the best in about 15 to 20 minutes' time for that launch. We have seen some pretty rough weather in Florida, but most of it has been in the southern part of the state, including Miami, actually, where we've seen some pretty severe thunderstorms during the course of Friday. Let me...
And attention on the net. This is the NTD conducting the launch status check. All personnel verify ready to resume count and go for launch. OTC?
OTC go.
TVC? PTC?
TVC go.
And TVC go. LPS?
LPS go.
Houston flight?
Houston flight is go.
Mila? Mila is go. STM? STM is go. Safety console?
Safety consoles go.
SPE?
SPEs go.
LRD? LRD is go. SRO? SRO is go. You have range cleared to launch. And CDR?
Atlantis is go.
Copy Atlantis. Launch Director NTD?
Launch Director?
Launch team is ready to proceed.
Copy, Steve. Thank you. Processing Chief Engineer. Verify no constraints to launch. Engineer team is go, Mike. Thank you, Charlie. KC Safety and Mission Assurance.
We're go, Mike.
Thank you, Lana. Payload Launch Manager.
The KSE Space Station team and the STS-4 trucks are go, Mike.
Copy. Thanks, Norm. Range weather.
Weather has no constraints for launch.
Thank you, Kathy. And Ops Manager.
Launch Director, Ops Manager, Mike, EMT is not working any issues. You are go to launch.
Copy, Leroy. Thank you. Atlantis, Launch Director.
Atlantis, go ahead, sir.
Okay, CJ, it took us a little while to get to this point, but the ship's in great shape. We have a beautiful weather day for you out there, so good luck and Godspeed. We'll see you back here in about 12 days or so.
Thank you, sir. On behalf of the entire crew, I'd like to express our appreciation to the teams for Pad 39 Alpha, ET-124, and the Space Shuttle Atlantis for their dedication and hard work. See you in a couple weeks.
Copy, thank you. NTD, with that, you're clear to launch Atlantis.
Copy, sir. Clear to launch.
Atlantis, Mother Nature has taken her shot. Now it's our turn to fly. Have a good one. Atlantis, roger.
CLS is go for orbiter access arm retract.
Steering checks of the 3 main engines are now underway. Fuel cells now on internal reactants.
Atlantis, close and lock your visors and initiate O2 flow. Atlantis, roger.
We We want to take you live to the Kennedy Space Center in Florida, where we're just moments away from the launch of the Space Shuttle Atlantis. The 7 astronauts are headed for the International Space Station. Atlantis is delivering parts and a new resident to the space station. We want to take you live. Let's watch the launch live at Kennedy Space Center in Florida. The countdown is about to get underway.
And the handoff has occurred. Ground launch sequencer has handed off to Atlantis' onboard computers. 25 seconds.
Yes, sir. We're going to continue.
Sound suppression water system is activated. 15 seconds and counting.
10 seconds.
T-minus 10, 9, 8, 7. Main engine start. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And liftoff of Space Shuttle Atlantis to assemble the framework for the science laboratories of tomorrow.
Houston now controlling.
Houston, Atlantis, roll program.
Roger, roll, Atlantis.
Atlantis' roll maneuver is complete. The orbiter's in a heads-down position, on course for a 51.6 degree, 137 by 36 statute mile orbit. All systems in good shape. Engines throttling down as Atlantis prepares to maneuver through the area of maximum dynamic pressure on the vehicle in the lower atmosphere. Already 7 miles away from the Kennedy Space Center at an altitude of 5 miles.
Houston, Atlantis, go at throttle up.
Copy, Houston, go at throttle up.
1 minute, 10 seconds into the flight, the 3 liquid-fueled engines are back at full throttle. At liftoff, the fully fueled shuttle boosters and external tank weighed 4.5 million pounds. It now has burned half that liftoff weight in propellant. One minute, 30 seconds, all hydraulic systems in good shape. The electricity producing fuel cells also in excellent shape as Atlantis heads downrange, 18 miles from the Kennedy Space Center at an altitude of 18 miles. The next event is burnout and separation of the twin solid rocket boosters, which are burning propellant at a rate of 11,000 pounds per second.
A picture-perfect, spectacular liftoff from the Space Shuttle Atlantis. It lifted off from Florida Kennedy Space Center just a few moments ago at 7:38 p.m. Eastern Time. This mission is going to last 11 days. The all-male crew will continue work on the International Space Station. Astronauts will deliver a new segment and a pair of solar panels to the orbiting outpost. They will also swap out a member of the space station's crew. Again, a beautiful, perfect liftoff for the Space Shuttle Atlantis, NASA's first launch of the year. We now take you back to our regularly scheduled programming.
45 seconds and counting. 45 seconds to launch.
GT helium inject, Delta P number 2.
Standing by for the handoff.
GO3. We're go. Copy.
And the handoff has occurred. Ground launch sequencer has handed off to Atlantis' onboard computers. 25 seconds.
Yes, sir. That's 7 minutes. We're going to continue.
Sound suppression water system is activated. 15 seconds and counting.
10 seconds.
T-minus 10, 9, 8, 7. Main engine start. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And liftoff of Space Shuttle Atlantis to assemble the framework for the science laboratories of tomorrow.
Houston now controlling.
Houston, Atlantis, roll program.
Roger, roll, Atlantis.
Atlantis' roll maneuver is complete. The orbiter's in a heads-down position, on course for a 51.6 degree, 137 by 36 statute mile orbit. systems in good shape. The engine's throttling down as Atlantis prepares to maneuver through the area of maximum dynamic pressure on the vehicle in the lower atmosphere. Already 7 miles away from the Kennedy Space Center at an altitude of 5 miles.
Houston, Atlantis, go at throttle up.
Copy, Houston, go at throttle up.
1 minute, 10 seconds into the flight, the 3 liquid-fueled engines are back at full throttle. At liftoff, the fully fueled shuttle boosters and external tank weighed 4.5 million pounds. It now has burned half that liftoff weight in propellant. One minute, 30 seconds, all hydraulic systems in good shape. The electricity producing fuel cells also in excellent shape as Atlantis heads downrange, 18 miles from the Kennedy Space Center at an altitude of 18 miles. The next event is burnout and separation of the twin solid rocket boosters, which are burning propellant at a rate of 11,000 pounds per second. SRB separation is confirmed 2 minutes, 15 seconds into the flight. Atlantis is traveling 3,000 miles per hour, downrange from the Kennedy Space Center 46 miles, altitude 35 miles. Ignition of the twin orbital maneuvering system engines on the tail of the orbiter, providing an additional boost toward ascent and heading off toward the International Space Station. Two minutes, 45 seconds into the flight.
Atlantis, 2-engine TOW.
Copy, 2-engine TOW.
Atlantis can reach Zaragoza in Spain in the event of a single engine failure. However, all 3 engines are continuing to perform as expected. Hydraulic systems in excellent shape, as are the fuel cells producing the electricity for the vehicle. 3 minutes, 20 seconds into the flight. Atlantis is 97 miles downrange at an altitude of 51 miles, traveling 6,000 miles per hour.
Atlantis, single engine Ops 3.
Copy, single engine Ops 3.
5 minutes, 55 seconds into the flight. Atlantis beginning to roll to a heads-up position, the onboard guidance system putting Atlantis on a trajectory toward the International Space Station.
Atlantis, single engine Zaragoza 104.
Copy, single engine Zaragoza 104.
And that call means that Atlantis can reach Zaragoza in Spain on 1 engine.
Press to MECO.
Copy, Houston, press to MECO.
Eight minutes into the flight, the engines are now throttling back to maintain the structural limits on the orbiter as it approaches loads near 3 times gravity. We're standing by for the main engine cutoff confirmation from the booster officer here in Mission Control. Main engine cutoff confirmed, 8 minutes, 35 seconds into the flight. Separation of the fuel tank has also been confirmed. The crew handheld photography setup will be underway shortly with a +X maneuver that's managed by the commander on board, Rick Sturco. Atlantis
following away. You can see the thruster jets firing as the orbiter is being maneuvered for the handheld photography.
Atlantis, Houston, we show a nominal MECO. OMS 1 is not required.
Leave the primary as the backup now.
Okay, I concur. We got Patrick. Patrick's good. With that, GMT, have you verified yet that there anything that trip us late in the count for a failover?
Yes, sir. Are you ready for the fill-in?
I am. We did not find anything on the LCC.
Okay, all cameras are up and operational at this time. The long range north is
Stuff like that, they consider themselves dual string right now.
Long range south is 7.
City Council on duty. Show the close that crew at AB11 on video.
Copy that, sir. We're waiting for confirmation.
Affirmative. Latest observation from Mistress from 2230 Zulu. We should get a new one in 3 or 4 minutes. The wind was 130 at 4. Visibility was 7. They were reporting clear skies, although there are some indications of some very thin clouds around the area. Current temperature is 70, dew point 64.
Okay, that's a great spread then, and that kind of alleviates our concern for fog.
Yeah, we're running about 4 degrees warmer than this time yesterday.
Yes, sir. Both dives were performed as planned. The crew reported low workload for both dives, and they did not have a preference for either runway. Roman said there was a little bit of turbulence for the STA, but the orbiter would have no problem flying through it.
Okay, that's on both sides?
He only reported that on 1-5.
Okay, copy. All right. I did my poll already. The weather has come in. We are go for weather, and I'm still holding that there are no constraints being worked by anyone in the room. If there is, I need to hear about it.
Can you call me on 212?
I don't think so. I'm trying to listen to you.
Houston Flight NTD.
Yeah,
NTD Houston Flight 212.
Are we going to need either of our D1 launch target uplink loadings?
Those are not required. And NTD, while I have you, we're going to have a TAL site update for on board. So if you give me a go for that, we're going to pass that on to the crew.
Copy that. CDR NTD.
Where go, Mike?
Savannah, Payload Launch Manager.
The KSE Space Station team and the STS-4 truck for go, Mike.
Copy, thanks, Norm. Range weather.
Weather is no constraints for launch.
Thank you, Kathy, and Ops Manager.
Launch Director, Ops Manager, Mike EMT is not working any issues. You are go to launch.
OTC, PLT AQ3 start didn't work.
Sky, I mean, it's pretty much cleared out. I like how they show that part.
Atlantis, close and lock your visors and initiate O2 flow.
I didn't know anything about the taxi.
Atlantis, roger.
Andrew calling me asking us
OTC, PL.
1 minute, 30 seconds.
Flight booster, 3 engines ready. Copy, 3 ready.
Oh, well, no hold required. ET helium inject. Delta P number 2 is out of limits. 2 or 3 required for LCC ET03. We're go.
Booster. Booster concurs. Copy.
Auto sequence start.
NSC, NTD, you go.
Let's go.
Director NTD, are you go? Yes, sir. Attention on the net, we're going to continue.
Excellent.
15 seconds.
Same, combined with the face clear.
All vents open.
10 seconds.
Copy,
let's go for main engine start. Okay, here we go. Going up. 3 up. 1, 2, 3.
Liftoff confirmed. Copy liftoff. Throttle up. 3 at 104. Go throttle up.
Houston, Atlantis, go at throttle up.
Copy, Houston, go at throttle up.
SRB-7. Copy staging.
Okay, coming up on press ATO.
Press ATO. Atlantis, press to ATO.
Copy, Houston, press to ATO.
Single engine Zaragoza 104. Atlantis, single engine Zaragoza 104.
Copy, single engine Zaragoza 104.
Booster shutdown plan. Shutdown plan is nominal. Copy. Prop and guidance, plus X and pitch. Go for both. Press to MECO. Guidance is go. Atlantis, press to MECO.
Copy, Houston, press to MECO.
Atlantis, Houston, we show a nominal MECO. OHMS 1 is not required.
Atlantis, roger, OHMS 1 not required.
Booster dump on time. Dump on 3 at 10 plus 26 flight. Copy.
Take 3, hard 14. It's probably one of the happiest moments in space when you see that tank.
T-minus 10, 9, 8, 7, main engine start, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and liftoff of Space Shuttle Atlantis to assemble the framework for the science laboratories of tomorrow.
Houston now controlling.
Houston, Atlantis, roll program.
Roger, roll, Atlantis.
Atlantis blasted off from the Kennedy Space Center in the U.S. state of Florida. The launch had been delayed since March, but the countdown seemed to go off without a hitch. We now go to CNN's Miles O'Brien, who was lucky enough to see the launch in person. Hi, Miles.
I'll say we're 47 minutes into this 12-day mission, and so far so good. It was touch and go there on the weather, not here at the Kennedy Space Center in Florida, but at 2 emergency landing sites in Europe. One in Zaragoza, Spain, one in Istres, France, where the former had rain showers, the latter had fog, but they, in the case of Zaragoza, the weather lifted and it was good enough to launch. The shuttle has never had to do an abort where it had to land in Europe, but that possibility is always there and needs to be there. And so before this scene could happen, before this liftoff of Atlantis could come, they had to have good weather there. We saw it happen on time. It's on its way to the International Space Station now. The docking will come on Sunday, and it'll happen in the evening hours of Greenwich Mean Time. But at this point, it appears we had a pretty flawless liftoff. I do want to call your attention to one thing that happened 2 minutes and 45 seconds after launch. Take a look at some tape, and you're looking at a camera which is on board the external fuel tank. And if you look off to the left there, you'll see 2 little pieces, look like little flakes of foam that fell off away from the orbiter. That's the key point here. It appears there was no impact with the orbiter itself. The reason this is of such great concern, the reason that camera is there in the first place, harkens back to the loss of Columbia back in February of 2003. When it launched 16 days before, we lost that crew and we lost that vehicle. A big piece of foam, much sooner after launch, smashed right into the leading edge of the left wing, piercing it with a manhole-sized cover hole. And when they came back in, it was the heat of re-entry caused the destruction of that orbiter. So the debris is a big issue, has been a big issue. NASA conducted a series of modifications, expensive, time-consuming modifications to the Space Shuttle and the orbiter to try to guard against those big pieces of debris coming off. They never guaranteed that there wouldn't be some pieces of debris, of that foam, which it coats that external fuel tank from coming off. What we saw there appears to be in the harmless category. Now they're off on their mission. They're carrying with them a 16,000 kilogram solar array, 76 meters tip to tip once they're unfurled, giving a tremendous amount of additional electricity and capability to the International Space Station, part of a series of flights which paves the way toward the end of the year for the launch of a European laboratory, a significant milestone in the history of the International Space Station. We'll be tracking this mission all throughout. Asier?
We know you will, Miles. Thank you very much. Miles O'Brien reporting live from the Kennedy Space Center in Florida.
Good evening and welcome to the Kennedy Space Center. I'm David Mould from NASA Public Affairs. Thank you for joining us for the post-launch news conference for STS-117, mission of the Space Shuttle Atlantis to continue assembly of the International Space Station. With us this evening are Rex Jevedon, the Associate Administrator of NASA, Bill Gerstenmaier, Associate Administrator for Space Operations, Wayne Hale, Shuttle Program Manager, Leroy Kane, Chairman of the Mission Management Team, and Launch Director Mike Leinbach. We'll start with brief opening statements and then we'll go to your questions. And now I'll turn it over to the Associate Administrator of NASA, Rex Jevedon.
Thank you, David. Obviously, we had a very good countdown and launch. And the Space Shuttle Atlantis is safely in orbit for the STS-117 mission. From the Delta Flight Readiness Review, which occurred last week, and through the last couple of days, it was a very smooth process, very smooth all the way. So it felt like we would have success today. The team really performed well, and it showed, so it's a really good day for NASA and for this nation's space program.
Thanks, Rex. It's a great day to be here. It's a great launch. This is the first step in a really challenging mission. We've got plenty of challenges in front of us during this mission and then plenty of challenges throughout the rest of this year. But what a great way to start the year and what a great way to start this mission. Wayne?
Well, I couldn't be happier this evening to be here. We have had the culmination of many months of hard work, including the last 3 months recovering from the damaging hailstorm that struck us in an unexpected way at the end of February. And we were glad to report that the external tank has performed in a magnificent manner. I spent a few minutes with the imagery team reviewing the images after launch, and the preliminary word is we lost no foam off that tank prior to solid rocket motor separation. In fact, no foam lost, at least in the preliminary report, in the area of aerodynamic interest. We did see some things come off late, as we have come to expect from all our tanks. So the tank performed in a magnificent way despite having several thousand repairs done on it, as did the rest of the system perform in an outstanding and magnificent way. I couldn't be prouder of the team, and I think this bodes well for the future as we look forward to the completion of the International Space Station. Leroy?
Well, good evening. It really is great to be here. We have worked very hard to get to this point. The team has performed outstanding. It's become one of my favorite things to do is be part of this team that launches rockets off of the Florida coast and puts man back into space. It really is very exciting. The team just makes me very proud to be here. As a mission management team, we had a few issues that we worked from the time we finished the flight readiness review, and as we were here a couple days ago, we spoke to you about a couple of items that we worked through. Every single thing that came up, the team worked through in a very professional and methodical way, and I'm just really proud to be part of this team. And today was no different. We had a couple of items to work through, and we worked through those in a very methodical way. And really, in the end, the mission management team really had very little to do, but sit back and turn it over to Mike Leinbach and his team and watch an outstanding launch. So it's great to be here. Thank you.
Good. Thanks, Leroy. On behalf of the launch team and the Kennedy Space Center, I'd like to welcome you all to the press conference and thank you all for being here to watch Atlantis lift off tonight. It was a beautiful launch. I'd forgotten how pretty they were. It's been about 6 months since we launched before, and it always comes back to roost that they're just a beautiful sight to see such a complex machine like this fly. The launch countdown from my perspective was really pretty nominal. Worked a couple issues, but nothing that really threatened the T0. And I'd like to thank the weather folks, both the launch weather officer, Kathy Winters, and also the overseas, the TAL site guys and the RTLS weather folks for predicting what turned out to be exactly the weather that they predicted throughout the day. It's a beautiful night for launch. You all saw that. Just proud to be part of this team. Thanks.
Thank you, gentlemen. We'll go to your questions now. We'll try to get everybody's questions in tonight. If you could wait for the microphone to come around, and please identify yourself and your affiliation and who your question is directed to. And let's start on the front row here.
Hi, Mark Kirkman with Interspace News. I'm not sure who to direct it at, but we obviously heard a couple issues discussed in the count. The one I'm most curious about is the echo issue. Could you take me through how you got comfortable with that and what was different about being LO2 side versus LH2 side?
Okay, Mark, yeah, we did see, as you know, we've talked an awful lot about the ECO, or the engine cutoff sensors, in the past, and we've been paying very close attention to them. Today, throughout the loading process, the performance of those sensors was extremely nominal. One of the things that we instituted as part of our troubleshooting over the past couple of years in this system is we have some simulated commands that we're able to send to the system so that we can determine what the performance is in a range of the capability of the sensors from wet to dry and back to wet. And so in the process of sending those commands today, during one of the commands that was being sent, and in this case it was to the oxygen, the O2 ECO number 2 sensor. In the process of sending that command, one of the data samples in the telemetry stream, in the downlist, if you will, the data that we're able to see on the ground, was in a sample packet that allowed it to show an indication that was off nominal compared to what was expected. So it really was not an anomaly. It really was not an issue. What it was is a matter of us taking a look at the data and having an understanding that the sampling rate of that data was such that we were able to get a snapshot of it as it was transitioning through the correct state that we expected from the simulation command. And in this case, it showed dry for that one sample, should have been wet, and it ended up being no issue. And those sensors and that whole system performed just outstanding today.
Okay, stay on the front row. Let's see. Seth, please.
Seth Bornstein, Associated Press. For Wayne, at about 10 seconds after SRB SEP, which would be just at the edge of your aerodynamic important time, we seem to notice something coming off and hitting about the right side, or appearing to hit about the right side. Did you notice that? What was it? Just inside, just outside the aerodynamic critical time? What, you know, I know it's early, but what do you know of it? And then just as a secondary thing for you, the look of, you know, given all the repairs to the tank and sort of the pockmarked look at the, I mean, obviously it performed well, but just how did it look to you as a, compared to what, you know, the normal look?
Well, let's see. As I told John Chapman, who's the external tank project manager, give me more speckled tanks. I think it worked great. We did see a piece come off, as I just mentioned, just after SRB separation. The preliminary analysis of that indicates it didn't strike the orbiter. It looked like a typical small piece of foam that we have been losing off the area near the bracketry of the external lines that run outside the tank. It was at the very end or just past the aerodynamically sensitive time, and so that is something that we have come to understand and expect, and hopefully as we continue to make improvements on the tank, we will eliminate even that, which should not be a hazard occurring that late in the flight, but we want to eliminate even that. So we are having a redesign of the foam and those brackets that's coming up. As a matter of fact, we have a design review on June the 28th for improved designs that we will implement on external tank number 128, which we'll see coming up in about another year after that.
Craig, still in the front, please.
Hi, Craig Cavall, Aviation Week. Congratulations. But for Mike, just quickly on the TACAN issue.
TACANs, we lost all three indications for our ground stations at about 2 hours or so, I believe it was. The system responded, the onboard system responded properly. The ground system responded properly and switched over to the secondary transponders. So the system performed completely nominally. We did talk about it some to make sure that it did perform exactly as designed, which it did. As you know, we have quite a few TACANs to choose from. We didn't have to go to any alternate TACAN sites because the secondary transponder came up and was working quite fine. So to us, it was a classic example of a problem that we've seen before in real life and also that we trained for, and the team responded perfectly fine. This was not an issue for us.
Okay, back on the wall, Holly.
Holly Hickman, Fox News Radio, for Mr. Hale or Mr. Kane. The AHMS, is there any initial feedback on how it performed, and is it too early to tell if you're going to continue to let it shut down more engines next time if need be? Not that it had to this time, but
well, we don't want it to shut down any engines, Holly. We want they run like great. They're Swiss watches. I did talk to the engine guys on my way out, and performance was excellent. The advanced health monitoring system box worked exactly as advertised. You know, we had those controllers with that hardware in all three engines. The software was enabled only on one engine, and we got good performance, at least in the quick look. And if we continue to see good performance as we go through the data reviews, we'll certainly enable those on all three engines for the next flight. A great improvement in safety that we've been working on for a number of years.
Okay, continuing on the back wall, please.
Pat Duggins, WMFE and National Public Radio, for Mr. Gerstenmaier. I asked this question during the last mission, so let's see if we get a different answer to this one. Considering the power situation on the International Space Station, how much do the astronauts have to complete on this mission for you to be happy?
Well, ideally, we'd like to get this solar array attached to space station and get it deployed and get it operating and bring it up to where it's powering the space station. We'd also like to get the other solar array retracted that sits up there on P6 and get it back in, so then we're ready to go make that move later in the year when we're going to go do the movement of that truss. So again, I think that's our overall plan, is to get that done. We've got contingency plans that, you know, if we just get the truss installed, that's fine. We can hook some cables up to it, keep it stable. We can deploy the arrays later. We have lots of fallback options. But if you ask me kind of ideally what I'd like to see those solar arrays deployed and see the space station kind of back in a symmetric configuration with the solar arrays both deployed on both sides.
Over here in the middle, please.
Hi, Greg Dobbs with HDNet Television. And I've seen enough of these now that I ought to know better than to ask you this question. It's not a technical question, and I know you don't operate on feelings, but with so few issues to work today, as you were moving toward the targeted launch time, did you have a good feeling about it? Did you have a different feeling than you've had the last 4 times since return to flight, when there was always something bigger looming on the horizon, weather-wise, mechanic-wise, or otherwise?
Leroy, you're it felt great from beginning to end and all the way in between. You know, as I said at the beginning, from the time we got through the Delta Flight Readiness Review a little over a week ago now, and we had a few issues to work, it seemed like we were able to make our way through those issues one by one. And the team did the same thing in these cases as we've done in the past. And as I'll say I've become very proud to be a part of the team for this reason, is they just follow the data and we work the issues to completion, and you know, that wound up leading us to our ability to go ahead and launch today. And today was no different. Once we showed up, there were a few little things for us to work through, but primarily we just sat back and watched Mike and his team execute, and it felt great.
How did it feel to others?
Well, Mike, I'll let you respond to that.
You know, we had a couple little things to work, but what we don't always get to talk about is the many, many thousands of things that work perfectly fine, that have to come together to give us the opportunity to launch this great machine. And so, you know, we can point to the couple little problems we had today, but gosh, we shouldn't do that. We should point to the thousands and thousands that go right to allow this masterful event to happen. throughout the day, I'll tell you, yes, it was feeling better and better as the day went on because the vehicle was performing perfectly fine, the ground systems were, and the weather was coming around just as the guys were predicting. And so to get all this to come together in a 5-minute launch window and to be able to see what we saw today is just a tremendous feeling.
I think I'd just add that the teams put a ton of effort into this flight. You know, all the external tank team that worked so hard on getting this tank ready to go fly, and then to get a chance to see it perform, and we'll get a chance to see it even a little bit better tomorrow when we get downlinked the pictures of the tank from the orbiter. I think that'll be pretty telling when we actually get a chance to see the orbiter and we can go look at the tank directly and see if there's some foam that came off. I wouldn't doubt that there'd be some foam missing from the tank in some areas. We've seen it before, but we need to take a good look at that and don't count our chickens before they're hatched. But for the team that worked so hard to see all that good work come to a great launch like this is just awesome. You know, sometimes you do a lot of work and you're not rewarded very well. You know, life isn't always fair, but in this case, we got a very nice reward for all the teams that put in a lot of effort. So we ought to savor this moment and be pretty happy with this launch. But there's still also a lot of work during this flight too.
Other questions? Seth?
Seth Bornstein, AP again. For Rex, this has been a year of rather unusual time for NASA, from especially over in Houston. Does this help put aside many of the problems in your mind that are sort of distractions, that are sort of non-space things, from Lisa Nowak to Moose Cobb?
I don't really think of it in those terms, Seth. You know, we've got missions to fly, you know, a portfolio to execute, and this just felt like, to me, sort of business as usual. You know, we've got a number of missions we need to fly to complete the International Space Station. We are pressing very, very hard on the Constellation program with Ares and Orion and the other systems, and I don't think there's any sense in which the agency is distracted. We're pressing forward, and I think we're making progress every day.
Jay?
Speaking of the missions on the space station, how many do we have to go to get the job done from after this one tonight? Are we 12 away or 13 away? Where are we?
They all want to answer. We're, let's see. So we're, I think of it as, prior to this, we were 13 plus 2 plus 1. And the 13 are the assembly flights, so now we're down to 12 assembly flights, plus 2 contingency flights, plus the Hubble flight. So we're at 15.
So if everything goes right, we're 12 away plus Hubble.
Yeah, and we got the 2 contingency flights that we would like to fly, and we think those flights add a lot of capability to the space station. They allow us to put some spares up. They're also there in case things don't go exactly right on any of these assembly missions. If something doesn't quite get assembled right, we want to have a little margin in the system to make sure that we can end up with station in a configuration that can stay on orbit and do its intended job as a laboratory. So I consider those 2 flights pretty important. So when I think of this, I think of like 14 flights to go.
It'll be 15 if you get everything you want, and by September 30th, 2010.
Yep, and it all looks on the schedule. And again, like we talked in the other press conference, I don't worry too much about the schedule. We take each one of these as a flight individually. We work each flight, work it to get till it's ready to go fly, and see how things come out in the end. And we've got some margin in our scheduling, some margin in our planning, and things are okay. We've got a good plan to go execute. It won't be easy, but it's not out of the realms of possibilities either. So it'll work out well.
Yes, over on the other side.
If I understand correctly, looking ahead a few days, Sunita Williams is about to pass a record set by Shannon Lucid for most time in space by a woman on a single space flight. I wonder if any of you would like to comment on the significance of that.
You know, okay, I'll say this, records are made to be broken. So we look forward to the next one, and I'm sure that we will have greater endurance records in the future, and going greater distances and exploring new planets. And I'm sure that women will be a part of the team and perhaps command the mission. So good luck to Sunita.
further questions? All right, then, that'll wrap it up, I guess.
Atlantis's climb to orbit was seen live by the Expedition 15 crew, keenly interested in the arrival of Atlantis, bringing a new crew member to join two of the Expedition 15 crew members, while the third, Sonny Williams, will be replacing Clay Anderson, who will take her spot as part of the Expedition 15 crew. We did have television throughout Atlantis's climb to orbit, so that television was sent up to the crew and they were able to watch it on a laptop computer.
Station Houston on Space to Ground.
Congratulations and thank you very, very much about this movie. It was very great for Sunny and Sunny.
Very happy.
It's very happy. She is very happy and we are very happy for Sunny.
Excellent. We're thrilled to see that her ride is well on its way up there. And if you guys are ready, we will take down the video and the Space to Ground 2com.
Okay, Dana, I think we're ready. And once again, thank you very much. It was just amazing to be up here watching Atlantis take off. It was beautiful, and we're ready for our visitors. Well, actually, I think we need to clean up a little bit, but we're almost ready for our visitors. Woohoo!
Well, get ready. They're on their way.
This is Mission Control Houston. We're looking at live television pictures as crew members aboard the Space Shuttle Atlantis continue with their power up and check out of the robotic arm known as Canadarm2 aboard the shuttle. Pilot Lee Archambault and Mission Specialist Pat Forrester scheduled to be working on this remote manipulator system checkout, maneuvering the arm out of its cradles. Lee Archambault and Pat Forrester are operating the robotic arm in this checkout and payload-based survey activity.
Houston, just want you to verify that you're seeing the picture Pat's downlinking to you on the blanket.
Thanks for asking, CJ. Should have told you, yeah, we are looking at it. It's crystal clear. Thank you.
Okay, good deal. Doesn't look too bad, but we knew everybody want to look at it down there. And Danny is shooting the pictures as we speak while the sunlight is still here.
All right, great work.
This is a view from the end effector camera on the end of the robotic arm of the Space Shuttle Atlantis, taking a look at that insulation blanket that has popped up at the intersection of the insulation blanket and the thermal protection system tiles on the left or port orbital maneuvering system pod at the back of the shuttle. This is Mission Control Houston. This is some recorded video from earlier in Atlantis' climb into orbit, a view of the external tank as it's separated from the shuttle. Imagery specialists will use this data on the condition of the tank following its separation about 8.5 minutes after launch to look for any missing insulation that could have popped off and connected with any of the thermal protection systems aboard the shuttle during launch. This external tank went through a lot of repairs on the ground following a freak hailstorm in February that delayed the launch of Atlantis until just today. Insulation repairs were made, inspected, and re-inspected prior to today's launch.
Hey Kevin, it's Bruin. What you saw just there is just briefly was Pat and myself just finishing up the RMS operations before. Here's Swanee.
This is Steve Swanson. You just saw a shot of me putting the PTCs up and working. It went great. It's a pleasure to be here. And this is Daniel Levis, and we're setting up for sending down some ET photos, ET video from our ascent, shortly after our ascent. And we're setting up some more photo TV equipment over on the starboard side, on the port side, on the starboard side.
me, Pat Forster. We were able to check the arm out tonight and get in preparation for our inspections tomorrow. Here's CJ.
CJ again, just checking things in the flight plan, making sure we're not missing something. And there's Clay and Bruce double checking the flight plan to make sure I didn't miss something, so I appreciate that. Also, Clay saved me a big harassment with CSACP. He did that for me. I really appreciated it. Just panning around, Danny's got the SSV cables there, and he ended up doing that one too, which is another big good moment for us as we finished up the Flight Day 1 activities. Crew's doing really well up here on orbit. We feel well prepared to finish up the mission.
NASA engineers are now studying a tear in Atlantis' thermal blanket that's used for re-entering the Earth's atmosphere. Our Miles O'Brien watched as Atlantis sped off for the International Space Station with its 7-member crew.
4, 3, 2, 1, and liftoff of Space Shuttle Atlantis.
It was one hail of a launch. 3 months after the Space Shuttle Atlantis got pummeled by a freak hailstorm, the spacecraft left the weather behind, carrying the 7-member crew to space after a nearly flawless countdown.
We can point to the couple little problems we had today, but gosh, we shouldn't do that. We should point to the thousands and thousands that go right to allow this masterful event to happen.
They were supposed to fly in March, but at the end of February, a torrent of 1.5-inch sized hail left hundreds of huge divots in the orange foam that coats the external fuel tank. Workers spent months trying to fill them in and smooth them out with what amounts to a giant pencil sharpener.
I've been enormously impressed.
The crew is on its way to the International Space Station. Their mission, to install a $360 million truss that carries 4 huge solar wings. They will use 2 robot arms and 3 spacewalks to do the job. They will also pick up station keeper Sonny Williams and drop off her replacement, Clayton Anderson. He is slated to remain in space until the end of October. His mother was bursting with pride.
I tell you, I'm nervous and I'm proud and I'm numb and I'm excited. And, you know, it's wow.
NASA has had little to laugh about this year so far. Before the freak hailstorm, now former astronaut Lisa Nowak drove halfway across the country in diapers to confront a romantic rival. She now faces a trial on attempted kidnapping charges. In April, a NASA worker in Houston shot and killed his boss before turning the gun on himself. And the agency's independent watchdog is under fire for allegedly not doing his job. All in all, a star-crossed 5 months.
Put one foot in front of the other, keep working, work on the mission, keep your head down, and ignore the distractions. That's all you can do.
But on this day, NASA found its lucky stars. The weather was good and the countdown was nearly flawless. The crew of Atlantis has its work cut out for it still. They can only hope that good luck will hold. Miles O'Brien, CNN at the Kennedy Space Center, Florida.
Die Raumfähre Atlantis ist nach einem perfekten Start auf dem Weg zur internationalen Raumstation ISS. Der Space Shuttle hob am Samstagmorgen um 1:38 Uhr mitteleuropäischer Zeit mit einem langen Feuerschweif vom US-Weltraumbahnhof in Cape Canaveral in Florida ab. Der Weltraumeinsatz dauert 11 Tage. Die 7-köpfige Crew soll im All unter anderem ein paar neuer Sonnensegel an der Raumstation anbringen.
It was 38 years ago this month that man first landed on the moon. Only 12 people have ever walked on the surface of the moon. And the last time that happened, 1972, 35 years ago. Well, today, NASA is again looking towards the skies, dreaming of going back to the lunar surface. New spacecraft designs are already being tested, and Miles O'Brien got a chance to try out one of the new simulators.
Before you can fly to the moon, you need to decide where to put the windows.
You can look out the windows and get an idea of, you can look out to make sure you're not going to hit any structure sticking out.
That's why NASA engineers built this mock-up in Houston, to see what they can see when they fly the successor to the shuttle.
And the bigger the better if you're an astronaut, right? Well, to a point. You want to be able to see what you need to get the job done, and you want to minimize the risk, of losing a window in space.
That's Doc Horowitz, a 4-time shuttle astronaut who is now spearheading the effort to take NASA back to the moon in a spacecraft that looks back to the future. The NASA administrator has called it Apollo on steroids, a capsule called Orion on top of a rocket called Ares, much smaller, much simpler than the shuttle.
And liftoff.
Space Shuttle is a very sophisticated, it's an unbelievable piece of equipment. Tremendously advanced. I like to compare it to a Ferrari.
So this is a Ford or a Chevy?
And much more so, yes.
These days, NASA engineers are running their best ideas for a space Chevy through a wringer, testing rocket motors, blasting models in wind tunnels, dropping capsules, even trying out new spacesuits. All good enough for the demanding government work of heading back to the moon by 2020. This time to build an outpost, not just to explore the moon, but also to learn how to stage a Mars mission someday. Bigger than Apollo, same shape but bigger, right?
Same shape and bigger.
And they're using another mock-up to finalize the interior design. Astronaut Lee Morin let me try it on for size. Has that been your primary goal, to make this a user-friendly spacecraft, essentially?
User-friendly and efficient to use so that the two operators can back each other up.
Unlike the shuttle, crews that fly Orion will have an escape system that separates the capsule from the rocket in a launch emergency. And the crucial heat shield is not in harm's way either.
We're showing that it's at least an order of magnitude safer to fly this vehicle than it is to fly the shuttle. You can see how far off you are in the alignment of that cone.
Just don't let me anywhere near the controls. This is my attempt to dock at the space station.
It looks like you may get close enough to get it all finished here. Close enough.
I think the computer saved me on that one.
It's close enough for government work. And we're the government.
That's right, and you are the government. Miles O'Brien, CNN, Houston.
Just don't let Miles drive. Well, NASA's new mission to the moon will not be just about planting a flag on the lunar surface or perhaps taking a golf swing and leaving. This time, NASA wants to stay. With the new spacecraft designs, the agency wants to get humans to the moon to create a self-sustaining extraterrestrial settlement. It may sound like science fiction, but it could easily become reality, and sooner than you might think. Scientists also want to use the lunar surface as launching pads for missions further into space, like Mars or beyond. And as NASA points out, the moon is considered a witness to over 4 billion years of solar system history. By studying the moon, NASA believes humans will discover more about the history of Earth, our solar system, and the universe. Well, it's estimated that a mission like this to the moon is going to cost in the billions of dollars. So far, scientists from 17 countries have joined forces and are already plotting out concepts for this new moon mission. But perhaps not surprisingly, the plan also has its critics. Let's take a look at one of them, a former NASA historian who says it's not a good idea. Alex Rowland said, quote, "Anything we want to do in space, we can do now more effectively, more efficiently, and surely more safely with automated spacecraft." The thing is that despite some valid criticism about the cost and the potential risk of putting people in space, it is something that humans just can't seem to resist. Like the pull of gravity, the lure of space travel, simply too strong. Back to you.
Thank you very much.
Raumfähre Atlantis hat beim Start in der Nacht zum Samstag einen leichten Schaden erlitten. Am hinteren Teil der Raumfähre stehe ein Stück Isolierstoff hervor, so ein NASA-Sprecher. Das Hitzeschild sei allerdings nicht beschädigt. Techniker prüfen jetzt, ob sie beim Wiedereintritt in die Erdatmosphäre gefährdet sein könnte. Die Atlantis soll am Sonntagabend gegen 9:30 an der internationalen Raumstation ISS andocken.
Not a surprise, not a worry, say the engineers.
It was at the very end or just past the aerodynamically sensitive time, and so that is something that we have come to understand and expect.
It's too early to say what might have hit the quilted blanket made of silica and woven glass. During the first shuttle mission in 1981, NASA had not yet developed the thermal blankets, and no less than 16 heat-resistant tiles fell off the orbital maneuvering system pod on Columbia. And of course, that mission ended with a happy landing. So given the history, NASA engineers say they're not too worried. As one told me, it doesn't raise my blood pressure at all. Miles O'Brien, CNN, Cocoa Beach, Florida.